impossible to have, good sex with someone without also having an emotional connection as well. Like those two things cannot be separated. I think that, we always think about, okay, look, it's just going to be sex. If it's good, then there's no way it's just going to be sex. It's impossible to have a really great intimate experience with someone and not feel something. Hey mate, I'm Coach Mitch and welcome to the Unbreakable Man podcast. It's my goal to help you achieve excellent results in the area of your health and physical fitness, your career or business, your relationships, and in your own personal passions. This is going to be your one-stop shop if you are the kind of man who wants to achieve his fullest potential in life. And the only way to do that is by becoming unbreakable. Hey guys, and welcome to the Unbreakable podcast today. In this episode, if you saw the title of it, then you're probably already pretty intrigued. I think that sex is one of those subjects that catches everyone's attention, unsurprisingly, because it's such a big part of our lives. And what's also interesting about it, despite the fact that it's one of the most, it's a very important area of our lives, especially an important area to get right, and an area that, grabs attention because everyone's looking for love, affection, intimacy in their lives. But despite how important we all know it is intrinsically, the idea of talking about your sex life is obviously a very it's a very personal thing to you, and it can be awkward to have those conversations. But I also think that because no one really talks about it that much, and look, you might have a conversation with your friends, but are you really going into some of the more awkward and challenging details, or are you just telling your mates what you did on the weekend and how great it was? This episode is not going to be like that. This episode is going to be me sharing some very personal experiences with you and what I learned from them, because I think that there are many men out there that are having issues in their sex life and think they know how they'd like it to be, but perhaps haven't had an experience to help them even understand what it is we're all really looking for when it comes to sex and intimacy in our lives. And I want to share, I'm not saying I know, I'm just saying that I want to share my personal experience, the things that I've learned, the things that have happened to me, things that I've done, and why I ended up in those situations, and what I know now that I didn't know then. So, I thought long and hard about whether I actually even wanted to share this. Again, it's very personal. There's stuff in this episode that I don't even think I've told anyone before, let alone publicly on camera. And it's probably quite weird that this is one of the first times I've really shared this, and I'm going to do it in a very public way. I don't know, perhaps because I'm speaking to a camera and there's no one actually in front of me, maybe it's a little bit easier just to get my thoughts out. But, I want to share this because I think there's value in this story for a lot of guys out there. I'm sure I'm not the only one. And, this podcast is about helping men make better decisions in their lives. So that's why we're here, to share the stories to help guys not make the same mistakes, and not just not make the same mistakes, but learn the lessons, right? So I've even got some show notes on me today, because I want to make sure that I tell this story in a way that is coherent and valuable for as many men as possible who are watching this. Now, the episode is about my experience with casual sex, and I think that, obviously if you're a single guy watching this is probably going to be more relevant to you right now. Or if even you're a single lady watching this, same thing. I can only give you the male perspective, but if you've had that experience too, then this might be helpful for you as well. Might explain a few things for you. But even if you're a man in a relationship, I think this is still a really important thing to be aware of. because whether you're in a relationship or not, attraction and sex is something that, especially for men, I think we can all agree that this is probably more of a challenge for men than it is for ladies. Not a challenge. It's not like it's not a challenge for the girls, but I think for men, we're the hornier of the sexes, right? So, sex and attraction, I think, is something that affects every man in his life, regardless of whether he's in a relationship or not. And I think that if you have a good understanding of what it really means and why you feel the way that you feel, then not only can you get control of it better, but from doing that, you can really keep your relationships in your life as healthy and as intimate, as passionate as you want them to be. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is, I'm going to share my experience of having multiple sexual partners at the same time, and how I think that most guys think that that's a cool thing. Like, that's like awesome, man. What have you got to complain about? And it's not about complaining either. I just want to give you my experience of it. But that's what I want to talk to you guys about today, and about that sort of casual nature of sex. And basically what I learned in a nutshell, if you're not planning on listening to the whole rest of the episode, which I'm sure you will, is that I learned that too much sex is also bad, almost as bad as no sex at all. Like, I think that a lot of men, if you're a guy listening to this right now, and perhaps you don't have a lot of regular sex, or if you haven't had much in your life, then you might be looking at guys who do get a lot of female attention and think that that's amazing, that's the best thing ever, and that, or what we should be aiming to do is have as much sex as possible and get with as many girls as possible. I think if you're an older gent, you're probably a bit more wise than that. But if you're a younger guy, that might be your thought pattern right now. And even if you're an older bloke who's just come out of a relationship, let's say you're a divorcee, or you're just an older single gent, and maybe that's on your mind as well. But my experience and the in a nutshell lesson that I learned was that too much sex is almost as bad as no sex at all. And I'll go into detail about the effect that had on me and how that kind of screwed me up, but also what I learned from it and why that's actually made me a better man since. So with all of that said as well, I want to let you guys know that currently I'm in a fantastic, loving relationship with a beautiful girl who is pretty much perfect for me in every way. And I can tell you for a fact that being in a monogamous relationship has been so much more fruitful, so much more productive, so much more purposeful and meaningful than having all the sex that I've had. And I've gotten more done in my life, more meaningful work done, and had more meaningful experiences, sexual experiences, since being in a monogamous relationship with my partner. And so right now I'm really, really happy with that part of my life. But it's taken me, it's required me to go through the experiences that I've gone through to not just be in this relationship with this wonderful woman, but also to appreciate it. I think that many men who might be watching this right now, you might be in a relationship, maybe you're married, maybe you've got a girlfriend or a fiance or something like that, and you might be having your doubts about it, or maybe it's not perfect or whatever it might be. But perhaps you don't appreciate what you've got as much as you could. Perhaps you don't recognize that you are in a fantastic situation with a truly great person, and perhaps it's not having that appreciation that is causing your relationship to not be as meaningful and fruitful and passionate and intimate as you'd like it to be. That's just some food for thought. Now, first thing I want to start off with is I want to take this right back to the beginning, and because I think that as men, our beliefs around sex, intimacy, attraction, they start way back in our early teens, or perhaps even in our childhood if we're watching our parents in their relationship, and depending on how it is. But I can only tell you from my experience. And from the first thing, if I go back to my teenage years, I was, in my opinion, I feel like I was a kind of a late bloomer, not crazy late, but a little bit of a late bloomer. I lost my virginity when I was 17, which is probably, might be average. I have no idea what the average is, but that seems relatively average. You know, there's dudes obviously lose it earlier than that. But one thing that I can say right now is that in my teenage years, and I think that most men watching this can attest to it, I'm certain I'm not the only one, but, you know, firstly, teenage boys are fucking idiots. Fucking idiots, right? You know, it's almost like when you're a teenage lad with your group of friends, it's like a race to lose your virginity. It's like a race to have that experience, right? And look, maybe you're not the first guy in your group of mates to lose his virginity, but I mean, I'm a pretty competitive person, and I think most guys are. And you definitely don't want to be the last guy in your friendship group to lose his virginity, right? I think that if we're honest with ourselves, lads, maybe we've never had that conversation outspokenly, but I think that that's something that is noteworthy as a younger man. And if you're a woman listening to this right now, I know it's really stupid. Trust me, I am fully aware of how dumb that attitude and that mindset is, and also how kind of broken it is. And I really think that it's something that young lads need to be aware of, but no one has this conversation with them. You know, that it's not about a race. We're not trying to do this as quickly as possible. But that's how it feels as a teenage lad. You know, you feel like, you know, I've got to get this done. You know, I don't want to be the last guy in my group to have this situation. So consequently, I think sex through those teenage years, especially for boys, again, just my opinion based on my own personal experience, is that it's as much as you're doing it because you're horny, which is obviously a big thing too. I think you're also doing it because of that, like, status competitive thing of, you know, if I'm having the most sex, then that validates me somehow and makes me, you know, a more attractive man compared to my friends, right? And that's a really, again, stupid way to think about it. Obviously, I know that now, but I definitely didn't know that then. And so one thing I think I've always felt as well, from like the earliest days of being attracted to girls, is that, you know, and I'm sure most guys get this too, pretty girls make me nervous. And they really made me nervous when I was a kid, teenage years and all that kind of stuff, because, you know, you're already telling yourself, I'm not good enough for this woman. And that's why you can't string a coherent sentence together around her. I think if you're a man listening to this or watching this right now, then you can remember the last time or a time that stands out to you where you were talking to a pretty girl, some situation, something had happened that allowed you to be in the situation where you're talking to a really attractive girl, and, you know, you want to be attractive back to her and you just completely mess it up and you just sound like a dickhead. And I think that, you know, most dudes have had that experience, right? And it's that silly mind trick we play on ourselves that, you know, I'm not good enough, and that's why you make yourself not good enough in that scenario. But that's something that I felt, and that really bugged me as well. And I think that throughout my formative years as a younger dude, you know, teenagers, and even into my early 20s, you know, one of the ways I think that men, how we validate ourselves is by how attractive we are to girls. You know, do girls like me? If girls like me, I feel good about myself. You know, if I have evidence that I'm attractive to women, then that makes me feel more masculine, or, you know, like I'm doing really well. That's success, right? And so, you know, that sort of mindset turned me into the kind of guy who, you know, you're looking for that validation. You're looking to find evidence that attractive girls are attracted to you. And I think that often a lot of guys end up in that situation, unknowingly. And it's pretty normal to feel that way, but it's not helpful. And again, I didn't know that then. I know it now. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's harder, it's any easier to control those feelings, but at least I understand why I feel those feelings now. So once again, I'm sure that you've had that experience yourself as a man. So that was kind of where I was at, and I remember kind of struggling, like wanting to be attractive to women, and you know trying to work out how to be attractive to women, and not having a ton of success, like not having sex, but not, again, in my head, having sex with heaps of girls, right? Which is again a dumb thing to really want to do, but to a teenage lad or a young guy in his 20s, seems like, well, that's awesome, right? And even an older single gent right now, maybe that's how you're feeling. You want to get back on the horse if you've just gone through a breakup. But that was kind of my experience leading up to it. And I remember a time in my life where I sort of cracked that formula, where I sort of learned to communicate with women in a way that made them more attractive to me. And I think that, one of the biggest things that's changed in the dating game in the last 10 years or so is the advent of apps like Tinder and Bumble and Hinge and all those kinds of things. Which obviously makes it easier for people looking for a partner to connect. We'll go into more detail about those things later on, because that is also part of the problem at the same time. In terms of it being a very distracting factor in our lives, if you're a single guy and you have those apps on your phone, it can be very destructive, and we'll get into that. But that was my experience at the time, and I sort of finally got to the point where I was better at attracting women and having fairly regular sex with different girls. And this is in my early 20s. And then I remember I found a long-term partner around that time as well. I think I was about 20. And, she was a beautiful girl. Obviously it was more to it than just the sex side of things. And I really liked her. And we spent 5 years together, and we lived together for a little while. And again, beautiful person. But I found that towards the end of the relationship, it was becoming more apparent to me that we just weren't compatible anymore. And things weren't heading in the direction that I would have been happy with long term if we'd gotten married and had kids and all that kind of stuff. It took me a good 9 months to break off that relationship. And it was probably one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. But it was definitely necessary. And looking back, I know I made the right decision. The last 6 months of that relationship were pretty sexless as well. And I think that as a man, and again, if you're a guy right now who's in a relationship and perhaps you're having the same experience, maybe you're married and you hardly ever have sex with your wife. Like there's very little intimacy in the relationship, not as much as you would like there to be. It's hard. It's difficult. I know for me personally, like that made me feel like unattractive. It made me feel like, unloved. Like I wasn't a man. Why is the one person that I can have sex with, because I am voluntarily in this monogamous relationship. I've locked myself into this commitment. The one person that I can have this experience with doesn't want to have it with me. And that gets to a man, I think. It's sad. And then look, here's the thing too, like, do not get me wrong. Obviously there were things that I was doing or wasn't doing in the relationship that contributed to that situation. So don't get me wrong, this is not my ex-girlfriend's fault. But that was just where we were, and I think that, if you're in a relationship and that's the situation where, there's no sex or next to no sex or like nowhere near what you personally need, then, it's going to create that angst. It's going to create that, what's the word I'm looking for here? Resentment, I think. And that was kind of slowly where I was getting to. It was like, well, you're the only person I can do this with. If you don't want to do it with me, then I can't live like this. Like that's important to me. It's important, again, back to this validation side of things. When you have sex with me, I'm talking to my girlfriend here, like that makes me feel good about myself. That makes me feel attractive. That makes me feel loved. And so I wasn't having that feeling for the majority of the last sort of 6 months of our relationship. And it took me a good 6 to 9 months to finally pluck up the courage to break it off with her. after 5 years, and after, she was my first love, right? I really was in love with this girl. I thought we were going to get married and have kids and do the whole thing together at one stage. And then that changed. So that was a really difficult thing to go through. And I was literally coming out of this relationship feeling unloved, feeling unattractive, but at the same time knowing that, throughout those last couple months of the relationship, whilst I was always monogamous, I'm not a cheater. Like I couldn't honestly live with myself knowing that I went behind my partner's back. So there was no chance of that ever. Just even though I wasn't getting my needs met in the relationship. I was just not that kind of person. But even then, like, you still know that other girls are attracted to you. So there's other options there for you, but you're just not choosing them because you've made a commitment to this person and you love them. So I was coming out of this relationship feeling unloved, feeling unattractive. And it was like, I wanted to feel that way again, so it didn't take me long, maybe 2 weeks or something like that, before I had a sexual experience with another woman. And it felt great to be back on the horse. Like, really, it was very liberating. It was like, this is what I've been looking for, or at least that's how I was thinking at the time. And that whole year after that relationship ended, that was where most of these lessons came from, and you get back on those dating apps, Tinder, Bumble, all that kind of stuff. And you're swiping, getting matches, going on dates, bringing some of them home, and it sort of got to the point where that now becomes a massive focal point of your life and a massive time drain on how you spend your time, right? And look, here's the thing. Whilst I was doing that, I was still coaching guys. UBM didn't exist then. It was still what my business used to be called, which was Legend Daddy. And I was working specifically with dads, but it was, still that group coaching for guys, and not just the physical coaching, but the mindset, mental coaching as well. And this process that I was going through in my personal life obviously didn't match up with the kind of man I really wanted to be and the kind of leader I needed to be in my business as well. So there was that bit of a disconnect too. Now, in saying all that, it got to the point where there were I've probably had 6 sexual partners, all casual, happening at the same time. And look, here's the thing too. I didn't lie to a single one of these women. Like, at no point did I say, hey, I'm going to be monogamous with you. Like, they knew what the situation was. I think that's a really important thing too, if you decide to go down that path. But that was the situation I was in. And it would literally be like one night after the other. And that sounds great. Like, there's dudes are watching this being like, that's awesome. What are you complaining about? But the reality of it is, man, I had no energy. Like, I wasn't sleeping because I was up all night with these ladies. I still had to turn up every day and show up and be this leader in my business, knowing that I was doing things consistently that weren't in line with the kind of leader I wanted to be. But I couldn't stop. Like, it was multiple times throughout that year, I knew that what I was doing wasn't good for me. And here's some of the ways that I knew that. I was, again, using so much of my time to message these girls, go on dates, have sex with them, book other days in to have sex with them. And look, if you're not, assuming you're not a heartless person, which is most of us, it's impossible to have, good sex with someone without also having an emotional connection as well. Like, those two things cannot be separated. I think that, we always think about, okay, look, it's just going to be sex. If it's good, then there's no way it's just going to be sex. It's impossible to have a really great intimate experience with someone and not feel something, and not have some connection, and not enjoy each other's company at the same time. And, if you're doing that with multiple people, you're being pulled in all these different directions, and you don't want to hurt anyone's feelings at the same time. And that's a stressful thing too. My mental health was really at an all-time low throughout this process. And And I didn't really have anyone to talk to about it either, or not in this way. You know, I actually remember towards the end of that year, I actually went to go see a sexual psychologist because I think that what I was really experiencing was sex addiction. You know, that was kind of what it was. I really struggled to stop. Like I'd have, you know, all these girls on the go, but I'd still be swiping through Tinder, even though there's like I barely have any time to do anything else already, but I still couldn't stop myself. You know, that I was getting that dopamine rush and that validation, that same word coming back again, validating myself. Like if, you know, if I have all these girls, that means I'm good, right? And I had all that going for me, and I couldn't stop. And look, this is how bad it got. Like I was 26 at the time, and I was getting like erectile dysfunction. Like my dick stopped working because I was having that much sex. And it wasn't because like I couldn't physically do it. It was my mind. My mind was my subconscious mind, because I knew I didn't really want to do it. It wasn't about even, it got to the point where it wasn't even about having sex. It was just about, again, that validation. Like if this girl is attracted to me, likes me, wants to come over and have sex with me, then that means I'm good, you know? And if I don't have that, then that means I'm not good. Like I really felt like what I had was, you know, all this attention from all these women. And I really felt like that thing that I had was really valuable. You know, I've got this valuable thing in my life. But despite that, this valuable thing that I thought I had was also fucking me up royally. You know, like my dick stopped working. I remember going to the doctors to get a prescription for Viagra at 26, and what I told my doctor was, you know, I want to be able to get it up when I'm drunk. You know what I mean? That was my excuse. And so the doctor was like, yeah, okay, cool, here you go. But it wasn't that at all. I was having that much sex, and even though I didn't really want to, I was still doing it because I just couldn't let it go. Because I felt like I'd never had this before in my life. Like I felt like I'd sort of finally kind of cracked this code of being attractive to women. So it was difficult to go through that process, and you know, like it's stupid. Like I'm using drugs to get my dick hard, so I can have sex with these girls when I really don't even want to have sex with them. I'm only doing it just for this personal validation. And that was the messed up situation that I'd found myself in. And even though I sort of subconsciously was aware of that, and my erectile dysfunction was my body knowing damn well that what I was doing wasn't what I really wanted to do, wasn't making me happy. It was a message from my body to say to me, Mitch, stop. You don't need to do this anymore. Like, this isn't helping you, and you know it. But I just didn't listen to that message. And it took me a long time to finally get that through my fucking head. I really remember the exact moment when I had that realization. I was taking a dump, or I was sitting on the toilet, had my phone out, scrolling through Tinder, you know, flick, match with the chick, sent her a message. She responded back to me. And I was thinking about, you know, a witty thing to respond to, because maybe this was my next girl. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, you know, I'm thinking about it, but I really can't be fucked. Like I really didn't care. But I was still just doing it anyway. Like I was still just in this routine, in this process, even though I didn't really want to be. And then I remember it just clicked, and I was like, why the fuck am I doing this? I don't even want to, I don't really care about meeting this person, which is a horrible thing to even say, like, to admit for her, right? I'm not even doing this because I'm attracted to her that much, or because I really want anything to happen between us. I'm just doing it because I can. You know, and I would hate for someone else to know that, or to feel like that, because that's shit. And it just clicked for me. I was like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this to myself? This is not helping me. Not only is this not helping me in my kind of search for love and intimacy in my life, it's sending me in the opposite direction, but it's also stopping me from being the man I want to be in all the other areas of my life that are really important to me. So it was kind of from that moment where I was like, just going through my the girls on my phone and just telling them, look, I don't want to do this anymore. And basically cutting off all those ties. And it took me like a good couple of months to get past that after I'd had that realization. And it was a really toxic time in my life that I'd created for myself just through this need for love and validation, and then also having the ability and skills to attract women. And it was kind of like this double-edged sword of, oh, that's great, you can do that and you can get these girls in your bed, but then finding out that actually that didn't make me happy anyway, that wasn't what I really wanted. And all I really wanted was to feel loved and to feel good enough. And I think that when you're looking for those things outside of yourself, they're never where they are never where you think they are. You think that love, that worthiness lies outside of yourself. But then when you go in search of it, you think you've got a lock on it, and then you get to that place, and then it's vanished as soon as you get there. And the goalposts move again, and then you're off chasing it again in some other person or some other thing in your life. And the same thing happens again, and you never ever realize that, well, do I just not love myself enough? Do I just not feel worthy within myself enough? Do I just not validate myself enough? And so that was the lesson for me. After all of that, after all of those mistakes, after all those dumb moves, that was kind of where I finally ended up, was knowing damn well that just because I could have the attention and the affection of all these women at the same time, doesn't mean that is something that is good. Not good for those girls, because they're looking for love, intimacy, validation, something meaningful themselves. And I'm actually stopping that from happening by bringing them into this toxic little world that I'd created for myself. But it also certainly wasn't good for me. And here's the thing, look, whilst all that was quite difficult and a shit time in my life, now kind of looking back on it, in the time, obviously I had a lot of fun as well. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not like it was nothing positive about it, but the overall experience wasn't positive. But I did learn a really valuable lesson, and that is that, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And here's the thing too, gentlemen, like if you're a guy watching this right now, and this is not an experience you've ever had before, like maybe you aren't good with girls and you don't have that confidence around women, but you want it. And look, here's the thing, dude. This is probably a fairly natural progression. Like, you are maybe where I was when I was a teenager. And if you go through this process, you'll probably even have the same experience as me. You'll learn, you'll have lots of sex, you'll realize that it's empty and meaningless. And then from that, you'll grow enough to actually create a really beautiful, lasting, passionate, meaningful relationship with one person who makes you better. So I think that whilst I look back at it, I know that was a mistake. I think that mistake is a necessary part of that process. Now, if me sharing this story with you helps you kind of internalize that yourself anyway without having to go through that process, then that's best. But some of you might just have to go through that process too, because I think that what is really important here, it's not about not having sex with a lot of women, right? That's not necessarily, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but I think that what is the best way to be for a man is to have the ability to attract multiple women, is to be a desirable man, be a strong, confident, fit, charismatic man, and then to choose to only spend your time and effort and energy on a woman who actually makes you better and who actually helps you and complements your life. Even though you could have all these women, fucking full well that if you did, that wouldn't make you any better. That would probably just hold you back in life like it did me. And you concentrate on the one woman that actually allows you to level up and learn these new things and create a beautiful, intimate, passionate relationship with. I think that is kind of the lesson I ultimately got from this, and I had to go through that experience to learn that lesson. So I hope that made some sense to you. I hope that if that was relatable for you, comment down below. I'd love to hear your experiences. I'd love to have this conversation. I think it's not had enough. I think enough men don't hear this stuff, and therefore they go and make these mistakes and don't know why they don't feel good about themselves and why they're having these issues in their lives and in their relationships. But comment down below, boys, with your own personal experiences, and let's have that conversation and help men start to make really positive, productive decisions in their intimate relationships in their lives, and be the kind of men that we want to be for the beautiful women in our lives, and be those leaders and role models for the people that look up to us. So with that said, mate, hope you enjoyed the episode, and I can't wait to speak to you on the next one. Cheers. Hey mate, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Unbreakable Man podcast. If you did, it would be absolutely fantastic if you could leave us a 5-star review, because that's going to help us get our message in front of more men who need to hear it. Now, if you have some feedback for me, I'd love to hear that too. Comment down below. And if you just need some mini doses of Unbreakable Man motivation throughout your week, then you can follow us across all social platforms. On Facebook, it's Unbreakable Man Challenge. On Instagram, it's Unbreakable Man _challenge. And on TikTok and YouTube, it's just Unbreakable Man. Your support would be absolutely invaluable. Now, last but not least, do not forget, men aren't born, they're built.